Good morning. My name is Sharzad Morgan. This video is going to be about incels. And I'm going to start this video out with a clip from Chris Williamson's podcast where he interviews Alexander from Date Psych and where they talk about some of the reasons for incels. And then I will be back on the other side.
Which is that most people are a non-insignificant cohort of people are not seeking relationships at the moment. More people seem to be risk averse. More people are spending more time online than ever before. When you combine all of this together, what you end up with are people who are less resilient, having to them traumatic experiences that can sometimes be pre-selected due to them being the common denominator between all of the abusive, manipulative, cheating girlfriends or boyfriends or whatever it is that they do. Then the large cohort of people online who aren't disproving any of these theories in the real world see stories on Reddit that quite rightly garner tons and tons of upvotes because they're shocking. That here's the guy who left for milk and came back and his wife was having sex with the neighbor and the dog at the same time and she left him and took all of his money and now he's got Crohn's disease and he's living on the street and gluten intolerance and a club foot. All of these things have happened to this one guy. Oh my God, this is why all women are bitches, right? Like all women are like that. One of the problems or one of the things that I see online, especially when it comes to trying to encourage guys to get into a long-term committed relationship, especially one that encourages marriage, is that they would say, why would I get into a relationship? Like a woman's just going to take all of my money and do this thing in any case. It's like, okay, did that happen to you? Or did you read one story or a small number of stories online that told you that this is something that's super, super common? Because, dude, even the heads of the red pill movement, like even the most red pilly of red pill guys, get into fucking long marriage relationships. Like Neil Strauss, the guy that wrote The Game, is now this completely renewed Tucker Max, the guy that invented the entire genre of fratire, lives 30 miles away from me at a ranch in fucking Dripping Springs, surrounded by, he's made a Waldorf school for his kids, and him and his wife have got 4, and he spends his days practicing shooting guns and corralling and stuff. Oh yeah, that's really the future that he had planned for himself at the age of 25, wasn't it? No, of course not. Like, obviously not. Even the people that were previously supposed to be the figureheads of these entire movements have transcended and included their experience to now become family men. And yet there is still a very, very common distaste, reticence, bitterness, toxicity toward that long-term dating thing. Again, this is obviously not for either of us to say that some guys haven't got themselves into relationships with women who have destroyed their lives, who were the Machiavellian, manipulative, that he was perfectly fine and she took him for all that he was worth. Like, yep, that happens. And to those guys, I have the absolute utmost sympathy. But the fact that those stories are so egregious online and garner so much like attention is for precisely the reason that they feel so outrageous, that they are less representative of most normal relationships. And yeah, I don't really know what the solution is for this, because for as long as people will take their cues about what the mating market is like from the internet and don't disprove it in the real world due to their concern and lack of resilience or just general fear for any one of the myriad of reasons that we've said, both men and women are going to believe that every man out there is a potential rapist, and men out there are going to believe that every woman is a spinster that wants to take him for 50% of his wealth.
Exactly, yeah. And something you mentioned that's very important. Many of these are very, very young men. You said, have you experienced a divorce? Some of these men are 18, 19, 20 years old. Have they even experienced a breakup at that point? They do not need to be worrying about someone taking their house if they don't even have a job and they don't have a house and they're living in the basement and that sort of a thing. Baby steps first. Worrying about forming a relationship, becoming resilient to deal with breakups, because most relationships will end. Everyone who gets into relationships experiences a bunch of breakups. That's something that happens to everyone. And worry about the divorce down the line. So you have, men going their way, mgtow. If you are like 45 years old and you've been through 2 divorces and you're mgtow, I totally understand that. Like, maybe you are done with dating, and that's kind of reasonable. If you're 18 years old and you've only had one girlfriend and never had a girlfriend, how have you sworn off women already? That's not reasonable.
Okay, so that was pretty interesting. They talked about how the incel community is really a pipeline. It originally started out with the red pill or the pickup artists, and it went into either the incels or the mgtow. So these self-improvement communities eventually gave up and went down kind of a darker path. And that what incels have in common, actually, and this is something also that they discussed earlier in the podcast, which I'll link in the description, is that incels have a higher rate of depression, anxiety, and double the rate of autism of the general population. And these traits do make relationships more difficult. They also have a lower resilience to adversity. And they're more risk adverse and spend more time online than in the real world. So they have a distorted view of reality, but they also have a bunch of inner characteristics that make it harder for them to face life. But there's also one more thing, and this is a thing that I've talked about for a long time, that is the biggest deterrent to men getting women. And it would also apply to women getting men. But what is this big thing that stands in the way of these incels getting women? Let's hear what Alexander from Date Psych has to say about it.
As far as relationship outcomes go, if you go into a relationship hating the opposite gender or looking at the opposite gender very negatively, that's already sabotaging your relationship from the beginning. How are you going to have a relationship with someone who you view negatively as some intrinsic part of them? You know, that's a lot of the discourse in these manosphere communities, online dating communities, not just manosphere, but dating communities, as you mentioned, for women as well, which is a lot of negativity and vitriol toward the other sex. And certainly that's extremely counterproductive if you want to have a good relationship. Especially something interesting in the data as well is when people get older, they lose most of their friend group. This occurs about the mid-30s, and the person they spend most of their time with is going to be the person they're in a relationship with. Friend groups go to zero for most people at that point, and they spend most of the time with colleagues at work or a spouse. And it's like, okay, you know, if you're a heterosexual man in a relationship, you're going to be spending the next 20 years with one woman. You know, do you want to hate that person, or do you want to have like a good time with that person? Something else actually very, very related to that. So Dr. John Gottman, who is a marriage researcher, classic researcher, is he identified these 4 horsemen of the divorce apocalypse, so to speak, which he could observe couples. And some of this has been questioned if it's replicable or not, but the idea was he could observe these couples and predict who would be divorced within like the next couple of years with like 90% accuracy. And he identified these 4 things. And the top one of those was contempt. And that's what you see an enormous amount of in these relations or in these discourses of relationships, which are primarily, like you mentioned, like female dating strategy or red pill or something. These are people that are struggling to date and struggling to form relationships, and at the same time they hold massive contempt for men or for women respectively. And it's like, wow, you're already entering this with like the behavior that just predicts right at the very outset that your relationship is going to fail.
Dude, I love that. Look, Alexander, I really appreciate your work. Everybody.
That's right. If you hate women, you cannot get them. Not only can you not get them, but your relationship outcome is going to be very negatively affected if you go into a relationship with vitriol, contempt, and hating the opposite sex. So, I'm not here to give advice to incels on what to do, but this is how they create themselves. They hate women, they have a low resilience to adversity, they spend too much time online, they see one story on Reddit about one woman who cheated on a guy and blow that up into all women. I should say that the data does show that cheating is relatively rare. There's like 10% of the population that's promiscuous, and those are the people that are cheating. So if you always get into a relationship with a cheater, you have to look at why you're choosing those kinds of people. They actually did some studies. I'm going to tell you the actual rate of cheating. Or actually, these are self-reports of people, of their sexual partners, done in 2021. And half of the population surveyed had no sexual partners in the past year. about 20 to 30% had only one sexual partner in the past year. And when you ask people if they were only in monogamous relationships, 85 to 90% of the people say yes. So the reality is that most people are monogamous, they're not promiscuous. And so you hear these stories online about these crazy stories and they stick in people's minds. But if you're not out in reality interacting with real people, you don't realize that that's just like a crazy story. Now, I should also get into whether women are really raising their standards. Another reason I think that people are dating less that they went into is that fewer people are attracted to each other, largely due to the obesity epidemic. I would guess probably a lot of these incels are also obese and unattractive, and so women would find them less attractive, not only because they hate women, but they're on their phones a lot and they are not hitting the gym. And just health is generally makes people more attractive. So men find women less attractive also because more women are obese. And I would say if women would just wear a few dresses, that would help a lot too. Women raising their standards. Again, people not finding each other attractive due to obesity, but as women's achievement has risen, men who are not at their achievement level are going to be less attractive. So that's a factor too. But if incels want to change their results with women, I think they have to get into healthier communities and learn how to have more risk tolerance, learn how to deal with rejection, get into some personal fitness, spend less time online, spend more time socializing, maybe get some help for their depression and their anxiety. And those are probably some good tips. But again, usually they don't want these tips. They get mad at me when I try to help them out. So hopefully you like this video. I will be back for the comments. Again, any comments that are negative are not welcome on this channel. This is a channel for people who want to share who they are, share their experiences, maybe give some tips. Any kind of vitriol and so on will not be tolerated on this channel. I kind of always hesitate to make these incel videos because it attracts like very hateful, contemptuous people. But hey, I just hide them from the channel. So I just thought you guys might find this video interesting. It came up on my YouTube today, so I just wanted to share it with you. And I'm going to go hit the gym now, and I hope you guys do too. And thank you for watching my video.